So our panelists tonight are Bill Barger from Ohio, Ethan Johnson from Ohio, and Ted Hildebrandt from Central New York. So I'll have the three panelists introduce themselves, starting with Ted.
Oh, thanks. Um, I own and operate Coldwater Pond Nursery in Phelps, New York, which, as Jeff said, is kind of in central New York State at the top of the Finger Lakes region. And we're a propagation nursery, and we do grafting and cuttings and so forth of conifers and other rare plants.
Thank you, Ethan.
There it is. Okay, I keep plant records here at Holden Forest and Gardens, which is Holden Arboretum and Cleveland Botanical Garden. So I'm not quite as long a term member as Ted, but been around a little while.
Thank you, Bill.
I'm Bill. Been doing conifers moved out to an empty lot 30 years ago and been planting conifers since then. So I think I've seen quite a bit, and I did a lot of with the database and the conifers. I've been with the conifers, numerous gardens, so I've experienced a lot of stuff.
Cool, thank you. So I think we had several questions. I think I only sent you guys one concerning this topic. A lot of people are worried about the blue spruce problems, the pathogen that's going around. What do you guys think?
It's bad. Yeah, I've pretty much wiped out. I've taken most of my blue spruces out, and you can treat for it, but once you start, you always have to do it. You can't not do it. I mean, I don't know, Ethan, if you've got any more information. I don't know. Ted, I think I talked to Ted. I don't know if he's got it quite as bad as we do. It seems like it's centered in Michigan, and it's got us pretty bad. I've taken out almost all my larger blue spruce. The dwarfs seem to be okay. They don't seem to be affected by it, but
Yeah, so far the dwarfs haven't been affected. We've seen a lot of the full-size trees get the needle cast, and the time to look for it is in the early spring to look for the little black, sporing, the fruiting bodies poking out of the stomatal bands and the needles. If you want to identify it, that's the time in the early spring. And I mean, around here, it's pretty wet in the early spring. So those get established. And I mean, I remember when we were out in Iowa, gosh, it was like 10 years ago, they tipped us off that this was coming. And then when we came to Wadsworth, Ohio, they gave us some hope. They said, well, if you've got good air circulation, maybe that'll be okay. And first, they haven't all died yet, but the full-size trees, it's just a matter of time, I think, for the Western spruces, especially Western United States spruces. It's not just Colorado blue spruce. It's, Black Hills spruce. It's any Western North American spruce that is from a significantly drier climate than we experience right here.
So if you're in a dry climate, you can usually do pretty good with them, I believe, still.
I don't know. I don't live in a dry climate.
yeah. Someone had asked about the pathogen, Ethan. What is that pathogen? I think you said you knew what it was.
There's a couple of them, and it's really hard to tell the two apart. One is called Rhizosphaera needlecast, and I mean, it doesn't really matter which one. I think that's the one that's more common, but I haven't really sent it to a lab to have it checked out, because it's just whether it's one needle cast or another needle cast. But you'll see Rhizosphaera, Rhizosphaera. You Google it and you'll see, University of whatever, different, like Michigan State has a website, and out in Iowa they got a website. And usually extension services that tell you what to do. And I mean, basically, with any fungal pathogen, you'd have to bathe your plant in the fungicide, and at a time of year when it's going to rain every day around here. So I mean, it just wouldn't be worth it. And for a big tree, it's just, I mean, we just cut them down once they're half dead. But for some reason, the dwarfs just haven't gotten it yet, and I do not understand that. If anyone has, like, Ted, do you got any theories as to why that might be?
I don't have a theory on it, but we experience the same thing here. Some of the dwarfs, I will have trouble with them when they're under overhead irrigation. But
Oh.
as soon as I put it out in the landscape, the same cultivar, it's like fine. So it's kind of weird. I would expect the dwarfs being low and congested would actually be worse of a problem.
Yeah, yeah. Good. There it goes. Shows you what we know.
Yeah,
Great.
right.
Thank you. I'm gonna share my screen for a second here about a grafting question. You see this a few times as you're walking around different gardens, where you have the tree trunk, and then the rootstock is a little bit wider and bigger. This is pretty exaggerated. What do you guys think? Is just sort of a strange grafting occurrence? Do you think the tree will do okay? Is there any, I don't think there's anything you can do about it.
I've seen it a bunch of times, and I mean, you stand the chance at some point it may become an issue, but I've got two trees out here. One of them looks almost exactly like that, and it's not a problem. And we were at the National. I was talking to Ethan about it yesterday. There was a juniper that they had that had been grafted like that, and the understock was like 4 times the size of the trunk. It was huge from where they grafted it, but the tree was growing and it was old. It'd been there for a long time.
Mhm. Yeah, that was an old estate in Philadelphia, and they grafted. I mean, we talked to Bob Fincham about it, and he said, "Oh yeah, that's juniper understock," and it was a dwarf Chamaecyparis, and so the dwarf Chamaecyparis was much smaller than the Hetz juniper understock, but it had lasted, maybe 100 years. So I wouldn't freak out about that. It looks funny, but
Yeah, if it's struggling, you can usually see it. It'll start getting black down there. I mean, I've had one that was on a pine, on a white pine, but I've got 2 black pines out here. One's on a Waits Golden that's doing it, and I've got a Pinus nigra monstrosa that's doing it. And the trees are doing fine. I mean, and it's not having any more problems than any other Pinus nigra ever have around here. They have all kinds of issues. So, I mean, it's got bigger problems than the graft union.
I've seen it quite a bit on Pinus parvifloras when they're grafted to strobus, and you get the large difference in diameters over time. But I haven't noticed any failures or snapping off or anything like that.
Okay.
The other way is very bad. If the
Yeah.
scion is bigger than the rootstock, that's a problem.
And unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be as common.
No.
Great, thank you. So we had a few questions about certain cultivars of dwarf cultivars. Horseman's, not Horseman's, but Abies coriensis, Cohort's icebreaker. I know a lot of people love that because it's so small and it's got those really great curled needles. I know it's not the easiest to grow. Any tricks of the trade you guys have?
It should be renamed Heartbreaker.
well, Bill can grow. Everyone.
Yeah, I've got 3 of them in my yard. I put them in the ground and they grow. I think it has a lot to do with when you plant it. I found that you want to plant it early. You don't want to wait till, first off, you don't want to do it in March when it's like really, really wet. So you want to get in the ground, but you want to get it established before it starts drying out. I've almost all my firs anymore. I'll do May or June, early June. After that, I don't do them because it just I lose too many of them. But generally, like I said, I've got 3 icebreakers out in the yard, and they've been out there for years. I mean, guy down the road, Jim Weckbacher, who's a member or used to be a member, he's got one that's probably 3 foot across and about 2 foot tall. It's huge, and he put it in a mound, and it hasn't missed a beat.
Wow. So raised areas are usually best.
Oh, I always put, yeah, you want to fur up on around here, you want it up on a raised bed. Otherwise, it doesn't like being wet. So you want to make sure it drains off.
I also encourage people to, if they're having struggling with it, to try a much younger one. And sometimes the younger plants will establish a little easier than an older one that's kind of set in its ways in the nursery growing conditions. And then having ones that are grafted just a little bit higher can help out too.
So being a fir, those of us that are either fortunate or unfortunate enough to be in zone 7 or hotter, how do you know what rootstock it's on, and is there a rootstock that's good for us to be trying?
That would be information that you'd have to get from the nursery that you're purchasing it from. Abies firma is a quite popular one for the southern areas right now. And the Turkish fir, I've had a little bit of experience with it, not a ton. I don't know. Have you, Bill?
No, what's prequel? The common names
Probably
I
the
don't know.
Nordman.
Nordman. Oh,
Or-
Nordman. I think Nordman is a good candidate, but it's got really terrible roots for putting in pots. I think the tree itself would probably be okay, but it's not the best for keeping alive when it's young. Got really weird roots.
And that's the problem with the out west. They get too cold sometimes for firma to overwinter, so they don't like using that either, right?
Mhm.
It's
Well,
not as hardy as the others for sure.
Yeah, isn't it sometimes grafted on the Canaan fir, the Abies balsamea, Canarolipas?
Yeah, but I don't know that Canaan. I haven't seen that much difference in them.
That's what I
Supposedly a
use.
little hardier, but
Well, it is hardy. I mean, that's
oh yeah. Well, I mean,
That's a hardy
not
fir.
hardy, but I mean, it seems to be a little more tolerant of that weather. But
and well,
I-
it's that one grows in wet areas, so I would
Mhm.
think that it'd be not too. I mean, I wouldn't think that that would be as susceptible, but it wouldn't be one as good for the south because balsam fir is the northern species, and so it wouldn't
Yep.
like the heat that much. So I think that's why, and especially I wouldn't say that one would be appropriate for the south.
yeah, I think they're just going to have to be happy with the fact that they can grow cryptomera and they can grow cedar
Yeah.
and stuff that we can't grow.
Yeah, because some of these firs, I mean, they're plants of the mountains and the north temperate zones, and it
Mhm.
never gets hot in their native. I don't know if you've ever climbed up a mountain and collected fir cones, but I mean, you don't suffer from heat stroke up there. So you know, it's moist and it's cool. And that doesn't describe most of the southeastern United States in the summer.
Well, yeah, and it's in a long extended heat, and then it doesn't really cool down at night. So
Yeah.
it's got everything going against it.
Okay, George has a question for us. I'm looking for what zone he's in. Good disease resistant conifers that are underused that go good in Japanese style gardening. That's kind of a large area. Oh, it's only 8 to 10. That just narrowed it down, George.
Yeah, that narrowed it down. Cedar.
That narrowed it down a lot.
Made it a lot simpler.
So, well, there's podocarpus, and there's a lot of torreas. But anyway, what do you think, Ted? We'll start with Ted this one.
Oh boy, because I'm up in the zone.
Put him on the spot.
Yeah.
He's on 5, yes.
Why? I don't even know for 8 to 10. That's just so out of my experience range there.
I think he might be able to do some oriental spruces. Zone 8 would be probably the farthest, so if he's much farther than 8, that might be a little tough, right?
What was the
I would
exact
think.
location, part of the country?
Um,
I mean, because hardening zones don't really tell you that much.
yeah, I don't know.
California.
California.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay.
That helps.
A lot of uh, cedars, right? Cedar Atlantica and
Yeah,
um,
I would think even you might, I don't know about parviflora. Parvifloras might be a little iffy, but those are, and densiflora seems to be doing okay. There's some densifloras growing out there in uh, San Francisco and gosh, where's it at? Just right around San Francisco, there's quite a few of the densifloras growing out there. There's a lot of densiflora cultivars, Pinus densiflora.
well, in Charlotte, believe it or not, there's a lot of Cameo-cypress and Ocatensis, the Alaskan cedars.
Yeah, a lot of
In
the
Charlotte's-
Cameo-cypress are pretty, tolerant of that stuff too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Blossoms struggle a little bit, but
Right. Hinoki
Alopecia.
and Saguaros. Yeah, Camcypress and Camcypress bicifera, those do well out in California.
Mhm.
Was there a
Yeah,
way,
those do pretty good.
I don't remember, Bill, was there a way to search for zone on our database currently?
Yeah, it comes up right on the zone. You could, I think you can enter by zone. I'd have to look again. It used to be able to. I don't know if it can. I'd have to look.
Yeah.
I think it does, but
I've
you
been
can enter
searching.
the zone.
But then the other question is, how dry is it? I mean, not just with the last
Yeah.
rains or anything, but I mean, if it's a drier climate, then then you're looking at the cypresses, the shoe cypresses and the junipers and things that can take,
Cupressus.
cupressus and
Cupressus should
junipers
grow there.
and a lot of the hard pines, the 2-needle pines will do very well.
Unless
Sienna. Thanks, Sienna. But Thunbergii, that might be a little bit too hot. They're kind of zony. Up here, that's too cold for them, but they're like a really narrow band. They don't like it real hot.
Cool, thank you. Lots of choices. So being in the dead of winter at the moment, people that have conifers in containers that are bringing them into garage or sheltered areas, how often do you think you should water those?
Well, I remember watering the bonsai at the Arnold every month. Jack Alexander said you don't, I mean, it wasn't a garage. I mean, it was a cold storage building, but you didn't want them to dry out. And so, yeah, you can't just leave them there all winter without watering them. But it depends oftentimes on what kind of mix you've got. With a bonsai mix, it's pretty sharp drainage. So that's maybe once a month would be too much if you had a mix that was more moisture retentive. Good question.
Yeah. I keep stuff in my cold frame out here that basically gets in pots, and I water it. I'll wait for the last rain I'm going to get probably in November, and I put plastic on it. I don't worry about it again until April.
Mhm.
So I mean, if it's cold and you got some moisture on it, it's going to be fine for a long time. They're dormant. They're not going anywhere. The biggest thing you want to do is that's like I keep them in a hoop house, and basically that just keeps the wind off of them, keeps them from drying out so much. But
So if you had them outside, just if you never brought them in, just the regular rain and
Yeah,
moisture in the
yeah,
winter.
as long as they got good drainage, because it's a lot wetter in the winter.
Right, you don't want them waterlogged.
Yeah, because I mean, like here this year, we're not getting cold at all. It was like 56 today. It's crazy and sunny. It's Ohio in January. Who would have thunk?
Right?
We just had a bad thunderstorm come through, which is really it could have been a snowstorm.
I
Uh,
often tell people when they're overwintering their plants in the garage or a really low humidity environment like that they just got to check them every couple weeks and make sure that they aren't getting bone dry. And like Bill said, in our cold frames, we don't have to water during the winter, but it's a fairly high humidity environment once it's buttoned up. But a garage or a shed's quite a different scenario.
Yes, thank you. I knew Judy was going to be coming on the call tonight, so I didn't remember her question. Judy, would you want to ask a question?
Thank you. I am interested in how much winter protection, and what pine should be provided for dwarf conifers, particularly ones that are, recently established. So I have burlap around an area, a small area, I don't have each plant. But this was at Frank's advice. I also was looking, I have used the proof spray on other broadleaf evergreens, but reading back the label, they said, they warned about color change on some of the blue needled conifers. But mostly I'm concerned about cold and wind.
So if I understood you correctly, Judy, you did wrap the trees?
I put them around the bed, which is about 10 feet by 20 feet. And the burlap is about 3 feet high. So Frank suggested that would help keep the wind off.
Yeah, that's definitely a viable way to go. Sometimes having the wrapping instead of around a whole bed, if you can just do the individual plants, some stakes driven in the ground, and then the wrapping attached to the stakes, they get a little bit more protection than they would on the whole bed.
Yeah.
I haven't found the
What is it? Turkey?
things like wilt proof and other anti-desiccants to be super effective. So I have had better luck with wrapping than use of those.
Okay, thanks.
Oops. Thank you. There was another chat question. How do you treat for pine needle scale? Anybody have any luck treating for that?
I use a systemic for like bear. There's a Ethan will know the right name, but I normally use a systemic if I have to notice that I'm having them, because that seems to work best. Because once they get connected and they're sucking down on there really hard, you can't spray them. It doesn't do anything. Ethan, I know Bear makes one. I can't remember what the chemical is.
Oh God, what is its name?
Is that the one with the imidacloprid?
Yes, that's
Yeah,
it.
that's
imidacloprid is the active ingredient. They have various trade names, but imidacloprid is it's an organophosphate, so you got to be a little careful with it. It's a cholinesterase inhibitor.
Yeah.
So if you feel a little tingly around, then you know that you sprayed the wrong thing, like yourself. So yeah, you definitely want to be a little careful around that sort of chemical.
Someone asked if there were any alternatives. I know a lot of times if that's real bad, I'll go out there with tortoiseshell scale. I'll go out there and pick them off.
Yeah, and I mean, if you get it early and you're spraying, whatever the dormant oil was the old thing that they always used, horticultural oil that you could smother the little guys when they're crawling early in
Good selection of words, guys.
Yeah, those little crawlers.
I've used the oils recently with pretty good effect too. It takes more than one application for sure.
Yeah, I always, the reason I didn't like it is it does tend to take off some of the oils and the wax on the needles and it makes the trees look older. But I don't like that. But it's better than tree dying, I guess. I've had it pretty bad on some trees, and by picking them off and then treating the ground, one time, it got rid of it. So it's never been a big issue for me.
So,
Okay.
whoops, thank you. One of the things I've done before is take alcohol swabs, like in the spring when they're still soft, and
Mhm.
brushed off the ones that it's not too bad yet with the alcohol, and that dries them up pretty good too. Rubbing alcohol.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for
it's
stem
uh,
plants.
Yeah, same thing.
So,
could I interject for a moment? We're talking
Sure.
2,000 units in a nursery, different sizes. The other part of it is that the different life stages of the pest itself show up differently at different times on different species of pine.
Mhm.
So are there anything else outside of the imidacloprid? Malathion, we might go, but is there anything which is a little bit on the more holistic side? Yeah,
oh,
yeah, just
you're
sort of,
talking
just
in a commercial
checking everything
nursery?
out.
You're
Sorry.
trying to do this on a commercial nursery? You said like 2,000 plants?
Yeah, it's a private nursery. Let's put
A
it that
private
way.
nursery, okay.
Oh, yeah, we all have private nurseries.
It's just that I have more
Private
than,
nursery.
or less. I mean, who knows, right? So yeah, they're not exactly commercial, and I wouldn't put them out commercially right now. But that said, I think that it's an incursion that's coming in and taking over a lot of even some of the natives that are actually around at this point in time. So up from Washington, what else will be new next month, but yes, it's coming in, and don't know exactly what to do with it, and nobody else seems to know what to do with it either. So it's almost like the oyster scale. It'll probably have to run its course.
I've actually, well, I'm really, really bad. I haven't done it in a long time because I seem to be able to stay ahead of it anymore. But I've used malathion, which is not the best stuff. It's pretty bad stuff.
Got a
So
long half.
yeah, but as far as holistic, I don't know. I mean, I always watch for it because you look out there and if you see bees and yellow jackets going after a branch, it's a pretty good indicator you probably got some scale there because they're trying to get the honeydew. But I have used malathion.
I'm just curious. As far as I know, I've identified it correctly, but there is no honeydew whatsoever. These are literally hard-bodied white, and as a matter of fact, some of the needles on the mountain pine right now, the rostatas, are virtually 90% covered in white, long elliptical.
On
On
scale?
the
It
Aristatas,
is.
some
It
of
is.
that is
Yeah.
they actually ooze a little bit of sap on their needles, and it can look just like the scale.
No.
Yeah, it looks like scale, but I mean, you're saying it's on more than just pines, right?
No, it's on all the different pines. At the moment, it's only on pine. I'm looking for it on spruce and the different spruce cultivars.
Yeah,
Wherever
they're real. I know which ones you're talking about. They're real little and flat and white.
Yep. And it technically list as white pine and scale, but willing to take notes.
If you're out there, you've got a lot of nurserymen out there. I would try to maybe see if you can touch base with somebody out there. There's whereabout are you at in the Northwest?
I'm outside of Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Okay.
Nobody else has run into it. Already checked those sources. I wish. As in, I do know most of them. I kind of grew up with a lot of them. This one's a new one for them. So I'm sort of in the far west by almost Kananaskis, and things hit me before they hit other people.
But you can't use the imidacloprid?
I probably could. We can't get it in Canada. Yes, we can bootleg it. Have bootlegged it. On the other hand, though, the after effects for how few of the bees and everything else that we have left at this time for a full year and a half.
Well, generally the bees don't go after the pine, so that's not that big a deal. But yeah, I would say Ethan might have a better idea, but I mean, I would say if you can find a systemic, that's going to be your best bet because it's going to get in the soil.
Okay, so systemic would be the way to go rather than all the other different ways. Or
I think so. I mean, I think your systemic is going to give you a longer term protection. Basically you just got to get it in the soil, and then the trees will suck it up, and they'll kill them, and they'll eventually fall off.
It's sort of this kind of circles all the way back for just a brief moment, and I'll kind of get off the airwaves here and stop taking
Oh,
over
you're
all
fine.
back to the fir and the spruce and sort of going, are the roots actually, the tips, are they white? Are they actually impregnated with mycorrhizae? And the malathion has, in the last 30 years, systematically killed off all the mycorrhizae, and have had a long, almost a 5-year duration to bring some back. Now, keep in mind, we only have probably a 62 to 65 grow day or grow days that
Oh,
we have.
wow.
Yeah. Now, pine, of course, is only going to be actually dormant here for 5 weeks of that. So they actually grow all the way around, same as our spruce as well. So there's only
Mhm.
like January for 5 weeks. That's it. And then they're back
Yeah,
up
you
and
you
moving.
want to do it early, as
So
early as you can. So as soon as it starts sucking up. But again, if you start getting a lot of rain, it starts washing it through. It's going to just kind of wash it through. But
that'll be
um,
February frozen. Because then they start putting on wood, right?
well, just not, it's not growing then either. It's not going to do any good.
Yeah, well, no, they are growing. But basically, at the end of the day, what you're saying, and what I appreciate knowing, is that it's a systemic that you're thinking of, and that would be about the only way to go.
That's what I would suggest. But Ted and Ethan might have a better idea. I mean, I wish there's another guy we kind of invited, but unfortunately, he's in the Bahamas. Poor guy. But he would probably have a better idea. If you want to send me an email, we can probably, I can talk to him, see if I can find something else. But Ethan or Ted, do you have an idea?
Like I said, I've had pretty good luck with the oils. Just multiple applications. And sometimes if I'm spraying the oil when they're at the crawler stage, I might use a more milder pesticide mixed with the oil too. But oftentimes I'm just using oil right now.
Don't get them when they're young.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I appreciate knowing that. So basically, you're looking at neem. You're looking at the other dormant oils.
I haven't had as much luck with the neem, so I've mainly been using the mineral oil, but the highly refined one. So it's suitable for both dormant and actively growing time of year use, not just the dormant oil, which is kind of thicker and heavier.
And thin it down, then I guess would be the other way of doing it. Then
I don't know what you could thin it with that wouldn't hurt your plant. So I think you'd either want to use the dormant one only when it's dormant, or the all season type that's already properly thinned.
we used to use camellia oil to thin it down a little bit, but
And the master gardener in me says, always read the label first before
Yeah,
mixing and
that's
applying any kind of chemical.
for sure.
indeed, indeed,
Public service announcement.
really. Ethan, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, because it sounds like you've had some, and the organophosphates are kind of nasty. So I can see why you're a little hesitant to use those. I haven't used them at home I just don't. And so the oils, that's the best way you can go. I mean, highly refined mineral oil is not going to hurt too much, except for the scale that it's smothering. So that I would definitely lean towards that if I was you.
Does anyone know where there is a previous infestation that one could find information on how they tracked it? As in, is it a 7-year cycle? Is it a 5-year cycle? Is it going to be like rabbits or mice? Or, how's that sitting there? Does anybody know?
I don't.
Okay. Scale comes and goes.
Yeah, it usually comes and comes. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
know
it never
going
stops.
too much. I mean, you'd have to repeat those applications like Ted was saying. You're not going to get it all with one shot, and then you're going to have to stay vigilant for a while.
Yeah. No. Basically, so far the rates are, last year was at 10%. By the fall, when I shut down in November, I would say that there was about a 40% infestation, and probably small items on other seedlings and things along that line. So I'm wondering how it can even travel when it's out of the instar phase. So there's definitely something else going on here that, how do they even move about? I have no idea. So if I can track it and you know of somebody or hear of somebody, do let me know.
We have a county extension offices around here. I don't know what, in Ohio, I know they do. I don't know if New York might too. But there'll be an agriculture, it's a Harvard Agriculture. Each county has an extension office that actually will help you with stuff like that. If like you have a pest problem, talk to them and they can usually give you some suggestions. I don't know if that's like that up in Canada, but I know that in Ohio,
I
that's
know
what we have.
I'm pretty much hot wired in there. My wife was one, so
Oh, ask her.
I did. You're on your own.
You
There
got
you
an
go.
inside track on getting the right answer.
Yeah.
I can only
Yep.
try. I think that you
Problem
guys would
solved.
know all, right?
Thank you. We appreciate it. Let us know what she says.
And never tell her she was wrong.
Exactly. Oh, look, see what has happened.
Oh, that fixed it. Thank you, dear. You're so incredible.
Exactly.
So, thank you. One of the other questions we had sent in previous was for some dwarf white pines like sea urchin and squiggles that grow relatively slowly, an inch or two a year.
Squiggles does not grow an inch or two a year.
Well,
That
sea urchin
that grows
certainly
pretty
does.
fast.
Okay, so the question was, what's the best way to keep them on the smaller side?
Well, first off, sea urchin's not going to get big. In 10 years, it's going to get maybe 20 inches. I mean, they just don't get big. Squiggles is going to get big, and other than doing some pruning on it, I don't know how you're going to keep it any smaller. I know the guy who discovered that, his name is Andy
Duval.
Duval. That's it. Andy Duval found squiggles and wiggles, and he actually shears them, and they look really nice. But they're getting bigger, and he shears them all the time, and they're beautiful plants. But he shears them every year.
I tell folks that when they're looking at those particular plants to start their ideas of pruning them sooner than when they reach the size they want them to kind of mature at. Because once they hit that size, then they're just fighting a losing battle, always trying to keep them in check. But if they start when they're a little younger and do candling in June, early to mid-June or so, once the candles are extended out, then they can have a plant that'll stay within their size range a lot sooner for a lot longer time.
So prune just about every year.
In that case, yeah, especially like as Bill said, wiggles or squiggles, they can get pretty big without that. And so it'd be an every year, just once a year, that once the candles are extended out before the needles have fully opened up, and then just candle them to a certain height there, and they should be fine for the rest of the year.
Cool. So looking at squiggles and wiggles side by side, how do you tell the difference?
I don't know if you really can. They're
There's
sister seedlings.
if you see them side by side and they're exactly the same age, you can tell. But to see them in a pot someplace, you'll never see it.
Yeah, they're
Actually,
both. Go ahead.
did you say something?
I was just gonna say they're both fantastic.
Oh yeah,
Brilliant.
and if I talk to Andy, he'll tell you Wiggles is better than Squiggles. So, but they look so close.
Cool. Keeping ABs small, like a silver lock, and maybe ABs in general. I don't think you're gonna have a lot of luck keeping those relatively small over a long period of time, are you?
Oberlong?
No, I
Silver
mean, you buy the Kohut's icebreaker if you want a small silver lock.
right. Otherwise, it's just gonna get big.
Oh yeah,
I
it's
mean,
going to get big. It's slow at first. It doesn't grow that fast at first. Like all firs, when they're small, it takes forever for them to get going. But once the silver lock gets, 10 10 feet, it's going to start to put on some growth. But before it gets to 10 feet for us, it's growing less than a foot a year. They're slow
And
at first.
And a lot of has to depend on where they got their understock, or not their understock, their sign wood. And I've seen silverlock that grows like really fast and it grow a foot a year. And I've seen it where it grows like 6 inches a year. And it all depends on where their source of wood is. And a lot of nurseries, when they graft, they'll go and they'll collect the sign wood that they want to graft to, and they'll take the bigger stuff. Well, then there's other people who actually take the smaller, and those different nodules seem to have an impact on them. And sometimes, like on firs, they'll want to grow wider before they want to grow more horizontal, and eventually they'll start to get a terminal bud and they'll start going up. But sometimes it takes a long time. I know that I had one in my yard that it got too big, and I actually ended up having to take it out because it just didn't look good. But I had grafted some others, and I gave one to my neighbors, and it's been out there, wow, 12, 15 years, and it's not big at all. I mean, it's big, but it's not like the other one I had was huge. And this one that they've got, I mean, I actually take my sign wood off of that because it's such a nice looking tree, and it's never generated a terminal for some reason. I don't know why, but it's just really full and dense, and it's a great big white ball in front of their house. And I mean, it looks really nice, but it does have something to do with how it was grafted, or what your sign wood source is.
Okay, sorry, that was a great conversation. Although I interpreted the question wrong. I just pulled up the email.
All
And
those words for nothing.
no, but that was awesome. So the actual question was, someone's able to purchase Silverlock in about 6 foot size in a 45-gallon B&B, but it came into the garden center too late, and zone 5A, and they weren't comfortable planting one in late October. Um, it was in great condition. What do you think about planting a plant of that size? Um, is it is a smaller one better to plant? Um, it's an expensive purchase, so is it better, that's basically, to plant a big one or a small one?
Because this
I
was a
think
fellow from Minnesota, right?
Yeah, this is Minnesota.
I think a big one's okay as long as it was dug correctly and in the nursery culture, and then subsequent transplanting, it's not planted too deep or the root crown being down too low. I've seen a lot of those silver locks, the bigger ones, failing in landscape, and it's been almost always a case where there was planted too deep either at the final site, or the nursery had it too deep, and when they dug the root ball, most of the roots got left behind, and there was just too much for the tree to overcome then. So that's the first thing I recommend checking, is where the root flare is and how good the root ball is.
Yeah, that goes a long way towards the success you're going to have.
Yeah, but big trees are expensive. I mean, if you feel like you want to try it, just put in a really good hole, and make sure you kind of keep it up a little bit out of the ground a little bit, and make sure you got good drainage and work that soil up. And you got to make sure you do everything right. I mean, I try not to plant big trees. I do better with small trees, but I'm not getting any younger.
One of the things I noticed when the few times I bought big trees is, and even sometimes in 3 and 5 gallon containers, you can go down 3 inches sometimes before you see your first true root, and before you see, and sometimes they've been in the soil's been up so high, it's an axillary root that you find. You don't find the root flare until you go down even 5 inches sometimes.
It's a serious problem in the industry right now.
And they do it because they don't want the plants tipping over in the field, but people don't believe you have to take off sometimes 4 or 5 inches of soil or potting mix before you get to the point that you're supposed to plant it, right?
Yeah.
Or they just, I mean, people have a tendency to, I've had people plant stuff that was, when I gave it to them, it looked really good, and then they buried it because it wasn't at the height they wanted it in their yard. So I've seen that. Actually, I had somebody I gave a Japanese maple to, and they said it was dying, so I went to see what was going on with it, and I actually dug 6 inches down before I hit the root ball. And then I asked somebody, I said, well, it's got to come up. And they said, what sunk? The ground was what was dry. I don't remember what it was, but they said it sunk, and I'm like, no, it didn't sink.
Well, yeah, that's why you plant it high, or you don't dig down so deep. You know, a lot of people think, oh, well, I'll amend the soil with organic matter. And if you do that for, you know, a whole foot underneath the plant, then it's gonna sink.
Yeah.
You know, over time. And so you're better off, I mean, amending the soil to the sides,
Mhm.
and to have a firm foundation where it's not, because you know, you don't want it to settle over time, because
Mhm.
that's not going to be good.
Yep. I've had them where I planted trees in my yard where I actually just kind of scooped down like 6 inches and put like a, 20-inch ball on there, and piled the dirt up to the top, and they're doing great.
Yeah.
Because you don't go too deep. I mean, you bring the soil up, you don't put the plant down in. And that also helps with the drainage. But, like firs and a lot of things, they don't like it wet. And unfortunately, I have a really flat lot, and I got to put stuff up that's a little higher in the ground. So if it's something that wants to be dry anyway, I always keep it up. I always, put it a little higher. I see Bob Finch's there, and he's being very, very quiet.
Yeah, Bob just came.
I'm just listening in. Isn't that question focused more on whether or not he should buy a big tree this time of the year and plant it, not how to plant it? And I
Well,
was,
I mean,
if he's in Minnesota, where you get those tremendous, terrible winters, I would think late October, the ground's going to be freezing shortly, and that would not be a good time to be planting a big tree. Probably going to
oh, no.
desiccate over the winter.
No, he'd want to plant that, in the spring, as soon as he can. Well, ish. It's, as soon as it makes sense in the spring. I mean, not when the ground you're digging up mud, but I mean, as soon as you can get it in the ground where you're digging soil.
And if he wants to have the tree, he should if he buys it, he just has to put it somewhere protected for the winter. Maybe heel it in on the north side of his house.
Yeah. And I'd get it, like I said, I would get it in as early as I possibly can. Don't wait. I'm not planting them in the fall, and they've done fine, but I know I've seen there's some beautiful porch and silverlocks that are out in Iowa that are just absolutely gorgeous. Now I don't know what the weather is like up in Minnesota, if it's that much colder, but I know Iowa's terrible. I mean, they're wide open, and they're 10, 15, 20 degrees colder than we are every year, and they're growing. They're just beautiful trees there.
Cool, thank you. So this is a fun question. I've grown Araucaria bidwillii in a container for many years. I did not try to bonsai it though. So do you guys think that is possible? I know Araucaria is going to get huge, and it has quite a few thorns on it, but you have to be brave to bonsai it, right? What do you guys think?
I
Oh
don't
no,
know.
I'm not the guy to know. I don't know anything about bonsai, so you probably want to ask somebody else.
Huh? No, someone asked. Sorry, someone asked. We grew an Araucaria bidwillii in start off in a 5-gallon pot, and I did not like moving that around very much. So if you are someone that likes to do some dangerous things, I'd love to see pictures of it after a while. But they
Yeah.
grow in pot, just like almost anything else.
I'd almost do a Google search and see if anybody's done it. I mean, they bonsai just about everything, so I can't imagine somebody hasn't tried it.
Cool. So we have a few minutes before our meeting ends tonight. Do you guys have anything that you do this time of year in the garden before we close?
Draft.
Draft, yes.
Yeah, just doing my grafting this time of year. I can grow larches, which you can't grow, which I like.
Speaking of larches, somebody had asked, does anybody know of any um, uh, varieties of pseudolarix? There's a rumor that there might be one. Uh, I haven't heard of it yet, but
I've heard that there's one, and I have yet to see it.
Right.
But I've heard there's a broom.
I mean, I heard a long time ago that they had one at the what was it, Brooklyn Botanic Garden, and their old tree, but I never saw it. And I keep hearing these things, you know, there might be one in Philadelphia area or wherever, but I just have yet to see it. Is anybody out there, Bob?
Well, it's not grown very much in gardens and such, so it hasn't had an opportunity to produce a lot of cultivars. And I don't know of any. I'm sure there's are probably some around somewhere in gardens that could be used as a cultivar, but nobody's discovered them.
And most of the tree itself is just such a nice tree that most people just use that.
Well, I mean, we had one little seedling at our nursery once that wasn't growing at all. And a member came in and noticed it and said, "What's that?" The only problem was the darn thing had a stem girdling root. That's why it wasn't growing. It wasn't dwarf. So I was, you know, that didn't work out. I haven't seen any true dwarf golden arches yet.
right. I'm just trying to find one to purchase that the rabbits will leave alone long enough to get big enough to enjoy.
Yeah, they're weird trees to grow. You put them in the ground and they'll sit for years and not grow at all. And then all of a sudden one day you go out there and it's like, oh my gosh, it's a tree.
Awesome.
I had one that was in the ground for like 8 years and it never did anything. And then all of a sudden one day it was like 3 foot taller. And I'm like, what the heck happened there?
Cool. Well, thank you everyone for coming. I hope we answered everybody's questions. If you have any questions for next month, or send them to me, and we'll get them on the list for next month. And have a good football season, I guess, for lack of anything better to do right now.
Grafting season.
Drafting season. Rooting season. Cutting season. I
Yeah,
guess,
cuttings
right?
too. That's
Yes,
right. It
yes.
shouldn't just do grafts.
Yeah. Cuttings and grafting and chasing stuff down and
Awesome.